What separates average salespeople from the elite? You might think it's their pitch, their experience, or their network. But after generating over $50 million in sales and leading teams at some of the world's most prestigious companies, I can tell you, it's not what you think it is. I'm Alleyne, and if you're in sales watching this video, I want you to ask yourself a question. Are you approaching your career like a professional, or are you approaching it like an Olympic athlete? Before I break down exactly what this means and how it can transform your sales career, let me quickly share why you might want to listen to what I have to say. I spent the last 13 years mastering the art and science of sales. I've been a part of sales teams at companies like Twilio, where I was their #1 performing account executive across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I've worked at Amazon Web Services, where I learned invaluable lessons about customer obsession, and I've also been an area vice president at a publicly traded company, managing a team of over 20 people with an 8-figure quota. Today, I currently lead outbound sales at Closers.io, a high-performance sales training and talent placement company in which we're currently on an incredible journey to $100 million in revenue. And P.S., I'm always on the hunt for great sales talent, so get in touch via LinkedIn if you want to become a part of the best. But here's what's interesting. My journey didn't start at the top. I actually gave up a full scholarship study in corporate law because I knew a career in sales was my calling. I started as a business development executive in the printing and photocopier space. In my first week, I broke the company record for the most qualified meetings booked. That's when I knew I was onto something. Throughout my career, I've noticed something fascinating. The best performers, the ones who consistently crush their quotas, who build incredible careers and who seem almost unstoppable, they all seem to share a specific mindset. It's the same mindset that I see in Olympic athletes. Now let me introduce you to James. James is a character that I've created to represent several sales professionals I've mentored over the years. His story perfectly illustrates what happens when you shift from a traditional sales mindset to what I call the Olympic sales mindset. Now let's unpack a bit more about James. He was what most people would consider a good salesperson, hitting between 85% and 100% of quota consistently, closing enough deals to make a decent living, but something was missing. He had this nagging feeling that he was capable of so much more. The interesting thing about James is that he was doing everything that traditional sales training tells you to do. He was mesmerizing his pitch until it was perfect. He was reading all of the latest sales books. He was staying late when he needed to close deals, and he was attending every sales training session offered. But here's the problem. He was approaching his sales career like a job, not like a profession, and definitely not like an Olympic athlete. You see, when I sat down with James, I noticed patterns I've seen hundreds of times throughout my career, working with salespeople across the globe. He was relying on motivation instead of building systems, treating each day differently based on how he felt, only training when things weren't going well, and focusing on results instead of the process. This is what I call the traditional sales mindset. It's what 95% of salespeople do, and it's why only 5% truly excel in this profession. Let me share something I learned during my time selling software at Twilio. I noticed that my best quarters, the ones where I was bringing in millions in revenue, weren't the quarters when I was the most motivated, they were the quarters when I was the most disciplined. This is where the Olympic mindset comes in. Think about it for a moment. Have you ever heard an Olympic athlete say they skipped training because they weren't feeling motivated? Of course not. They have systems, they have routines, they have a completely different approach to their craft. I'm going to show you exactly how to make this shift, but first you need to understand what I mean by the Olympic sales mindset and why it's fundamentally different from how most salespeople approach their career. The first principle of the Olympic sales mindset is understanding that systems beat motivation every single time. Think about Michael Phelps for a moment. Before he became the most decorated Olympian of all time, he trained for 6 hours per day, 365 days of the year, for over a decade. He didn't wake up every morning feeling motivated, he had a system. In sales, this principle transformed James's entire approach. Instead of relying on motivation to make his calls or follow up with prospects, we built what I call the performance operating system. Let me break this down for you, because this is exactly what I implemented when I was at AWS, and it's what's helped me consistently outperform in a highly competitive environment. Your performance operating system has 3 core components. First is your morning execution ritual. This isn't about watching motivational videos or reading inspiring quotes. It's about having a precise sequence of actions that prepare you for peak performance. Here's what mine looked like when I was an active salesperson. At 6 a.m., I'd review my pipeline and identify the 3 most important deals that need attention. By 6:30, I'd be studying yesterday's call recordings, focusing on what worked and what didn't. By 7:30, I'd be practicing handling the 3 most common objections I'm currently facing. And by 8 a.m., I'd be planning my energy management for the day ahead based on the most important calls. The second component is your performance tracking system. Olympic athletes obsessively track their metrics, not just their medals. In sales, this tracking means your energy levels throughout different times of the day, your week-over-week close rates, your conversion rate from discovery to the next sales stage, and the pace of your pipeline progression. This concept is an area I continue to encourage my team to work on. We see that the more often we make offers to prospects, the more often that we close deals. And therefore, I encourage my team to increase their ability to pitch and to make offers week over week, to give them the best opportunity to overachieve. The third component is your recovery protocol. This is something I barely see any salespeople doing, but every Olympic athlete understands its importance. Just like athletes need recovery time between training sessions, your brain needs strategic breaks to maintain peak performance. In practice, this means taking a 10-minute break after every 2 calls, assuming your calendar allows. Having a proper lunch break away from your desk, implementing a post-call review ritual, and having an effective recovery protocol outside of working hours to allow you to mentally reset. When James implemented this system, something interesting happened. Within the first month, his activity levels actually decreased, but his results improved dramatically. He went from 85% of quota to 125% in just 90 days. It begs the question why? Because he wasn't just working harder, he was working like an athlete. Every action had a purpose, every day had a structure, and every week had a plan. This is just the first principle of the Olympic sales mindset. Now it's time to unpack the second. The second principle of the Olympic sales mindset is what I call the stoic competitor. This is where most salespeople really struggle, and it's where the Olympic mindset creates a massive advantage. Here's a hard truth I learned early in my career. Sales is the only profession where you have to hear no's more than yeses in order to be successful. Think about that for a moment. Even if you're an elite closer with a 40% close rate, that means 60% of the time you're hearing no. This is where our friend James really struggled. Like most salespeople, he was taking every no personally. Each lost deal felt like a personal failure, and each objection felt like a rejection. Let me share something from my time at Twilio. I was working on one of the largest deals in the company's history at the time. It was worth over $8 million. We'd been working on it for 9 months and everything looked perfect. Then at the final hour, they hired a procurement leader to interrogate the deal, which completely disrupted our progress to date. Now, most salespeople would have been heavily frustrated. They might let it affect their performance in driving to get the deal over the line. But this is where the Olympic mindset, specifically the stoic philosophy component, becomes your secret weapon. Think about an Olympic athlete. When they're competing, do they have time to dwell on their last mistake? Can they afford to let one bad performance affect their next event? Of course not. They need to remain mentally strong and focused regardless of what's happening around them. And here's how we implement this within sales. First, we practice what I call outcome independence. This doesn't mean you don't care about results. It means you focus entirely on what you can control. And in your sales career, you can control your preparation, your energy, your follow-through, and your learning from each interaction. But you can't control market conditions, your competitors' actions, internal decisions at your prospect's company, and individual buyer preferences. When James started focusing only on what he could control, something interesting happened. His emotional stability improved, which actually led to better performance. He stopped getting defensive during tough conversations because he wasn't taking things personally anymore. The second part of being a stoic competitor is what I call progressive resilience. Olympic athletes don't just handle adversity, they get stronger from it. Every no becomes a learning opportunity, and every lost deal becomes a chance to improve. Here's the system I developed for building progressive resilience. The first component is the 5-minute rule. When you face a setback, you get 5 minutes to feel whatever you need to feel. And after that, you ask yourself one question: what can I learn from this? The second component is the replay method. After every lost deal, don't just move on. Study it like an athlete studies game tape. What worked, what didn't, and what patterns can you identify? The third component is the pressure protocol. Deliberately put yourself in challenging situations during practice so you're better prepared for real pressure. This might mean role-playing tough objections or practicing difficult conversations. When I implemented this within my own sales career, I started treating objections not as obstacles, but as opportunities. Lost deals became learning experiences rather than failures, and my win rates actually increased because I was learning from every interaction, not just the successful ones. The third principle of the Olympic sales mindset is what separates good salespeople from the truly elite. It's deliberate practice. Let me tell you something that shocked me when I became area vice president at Braze, leading a team of over 20 people. Most salespeople spend less than 1% of their time actually practicing their craft. They're either on live calls or they're doing admin work. There's typically no in between. Think about how absurd that would sound to an Olympic athlete. Imagine telling Michael Phelps, hey, just show up to competitions, don't worry about practice. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, right? That was exactly where James was stuck. He was showing up every day, making his calls, sending his emails, but he wasn't deliberately practicing his craft. He was just repeating the same patterns, making the same mistakes and wondering why he wasn't improving. Let me share something from my time at Amazon Web Services. I was working with a complex product, namely Amazon Connect, their contact center platform. The technical complexity was intense, so instead of trying to freestyle during customer conversations, I took a different approach. I implemented what I call the Elite Practice Protocol, and here's how it works. First, we have micro practice sessions. These are 15-minute focus sessions where you practice one specific skill. Not your whole pitch, not your whole discovery call, just one element. For example, you could be practicing your opening hooks for cold calls, transition statements during discovery, specific objection responses, or ROI calculations. The key is to practice these when you're not in front of customers, just like an athlete practices their technique before the actual competition. Second, we use what I call game film analysis. At closers.io, we record every single one of our calls, but here's the crucial part. We don't just listen to them, we analyze them using our performance matrix. What questions generated the most insightful responses? Where did we miss opportunities to go deeper? How did our energy levels affect the conversation? And what approaches led to successful outcomes? When James started implementing this, he made a fascinating discovery. He realized that 80% of his lost deals actually showed warning signs in the first 10 minutes of discovery, but he'd never noticed this because he wasn't actually studying his performance systematically. The third component is what I call pressure testing. This is something I learned from my time leading teams. Olympic athletes don't just practice in perfect conditions, they simulate competition pressure. In sales, this means role-playing difficult conversations with peers, practicing high-stakes presentations under pressure, simulating complex negotiations with multiple stakeholders, and running through worst-case scenario objections. But here's the key difference between regular practice and deliberate practice. You need feedback loops. When I was scaling my team at Braze, we created what I call performance pods, small groups of salespeople who would practice together and provide structured feedback. The results? One of my reps went from inconsistencies in performance to closing the largest deal in the company's history at the time within 90 days of implementing this system. Now let me bring this full circle and show you exactly how to implement what we've covered today. Remember James? Now within 6 months of implementing the Olympic sales mindset, he wasn't just hitting quota, but he was consistently at 150% of target. But more importantly, he had transformed. He went from someone who was just going through the motions to being truly engaged in his sales career as a true profession. But here's what's really interesting though. When I catch up with him now, he rarely talks about his numbers. Instead, he talks about his process, his system, and his approach to his craft. Just like an Olympic athlete focuses on perfecting their technique, rather than obsessing only on the outcome. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Well, Alex, this sounds great, but I've got deals to close this month. I don't have time to completely transform my approach. This is exactly what one of my reps told me when I was AVP at Braze, but here's what I told him. You don't have to implement everything at once. Olympic athletes don't transform overnight. They make small, consistent improvements that compound over time. So here's your implementation plan over the next 30 days. During week 1, I want you to focus on systems over motivation. Create your own morning execution ritual. Start tracking your energy levels throughout the day. Implement your basic recovery protocol, and don't worry about perfection, focus on consistency. During your second week, I want you to be a stoic competitor. Start using the 5-minute rule after setbacks. Begin logging your controllables versus uncontrollables. Practice outcome independence in at least 1 call per day, and study one lost deal using the replay method. During your third week, this is where it's about deliberate practice. I want you to schedule 3 15-minute micro practice sessions, record at least 2 calls and analyze them, find a practice partner for pressure testing, and create your first performance pod with colleagues. During your fourth week, this is where the focus is about integration. Refine your systems based on what's working, adjust your practice focus based on results, start to measure your improvement metrics, and plan your next 30-day focus areas. Now here's something crucial I learned during my time at Amazon: the power of community. Olympic athletes don't train alone, they have teams, coaches, and training partners who push them to be better. And this is why I'm continuing to build a community of sales professionals who think just like athletes, people who are committed to mastery, not just metrics, people who understand that true success comes from systematic improvement, not just motivation. And if you're serious about taking your sales career to the next level, here's what I want you to do. First, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week I'm sharing specific techniques, strategies, and mindset shifts that have helped me to generate over $50 million in sales and lead teams at some of the world's most prestigious companies. Second, I want you to comment below with Olympic mindset. If you're committed to implementing these principles, this isn't just about engagement. I read every comment, and I want to know who's serious about elevating their game. Third, I want you to share this video with one other sales professional who you think needs to hear this message. Success is a team sport, and the best way to improve is to surround yourself with people on the same mission. Remember this: every Olympic athlete started as a beginner. What separated them wasn't talent, it was their approach to their craft. The same is true in sales. The question is, are you ready to start training like the elite? If so, I'm always looking for great talent to come and join me as we build the next generational company here at Closers.io. If you think that could be you, please reach out to me via LinkedIn with your reasons why. I'm Alleyne, and I'll see you on the next video.